All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are talking about the LA Chargers, and I am joined by Miles Rerucha from the Chargers Powder Hour podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. You nailed the last name, by the way, so good job. But yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
doing good. I'm ready for football to be back. That's for sure.
Well, talking about the Chargers, I mean, there's been a lot of, buzz or, for them, the last couple of years. And this year, is this kind of the most excited that you've been as a Chargers fan in a while?
See, I want to say that I was just as excited going into last year,
Mhm.
just because you got Justin Herbert who just came off his offensive rookie of the year. But my excitement for this year has to blow last year out of the water. Just if I could have saw into the future from last year, how the season was going to end up, and then obviously the acquisitions that we've made through the draft, through free agency, some good players that we've re-signed. Yeah, this has got to be the most excited that I've been for a football season in a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, they really brought in a lot of pieces, and I am a Bears fan. I'm not sure if you know that. So, Khalil Herbert, that'll be interesting. I think, as a Bears fan, sad to see him go. Sad to see that we didn't really have the type of career out of him here long term. But it was time for him to go, and looking at him when he was with the Bears, he was expected to be that guy. And looking at him with the Chargers, he doesn't have to be that guy. He's got a lot of, there's a lot of pieces on that defense that you know, he doesn't have to be the number one, guy on the defense, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we saw games in the past with Joey Bosa on the other side when we had just some dudes that were capable pass rushers, but not a former defensive player of the year. Joey Bosa would be getting triple teamed because they weren't too scared of what we had on the other side. So then you got that. You got Joey and Khalil coming at you. And then you got obviously the DBs, just re signed Derwin yesterday to a massive contract, signed JC Jackson this offseason. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be fun being a quarterback against the Chargers this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, tell you what, I mean, the offense, gets a lot of publicity, but with this defense, I mean, it's going to be an interesting, mix of to face them with the those DBs, with all around. So when you look at that defense, is there a weakness, and what would the weakness of the Chargers defense be?
In the past, the last few years that have really scared us is our run D. We've always been our run D is really the main reason why we missed playoffs last year. I think they were in like the 28th. They were like the 28th, 29th team in yards allowed on the ground. I mean, and then we gave up 140 something yards to Rex Burkhead last year. Like dudes like that would just carve us up. And then we made some other underrated signings. Austin Johnson, defensive tackle from the Giants, came over. He'll be a nice piece. And Sebastian Joseph Day, who was alongside Aaron Donald there in
Mm.
LA. He's came over now. So I think that run D has solidified. I want to say that a weakness for us would be linebackers. Kenneth Murray, he hasn't really shown a ton in his first few years. He's a little banged up now. He's supposed to start practicing next week. Drew Tranquil's shown really good flashes, especially for I believe he was a fourth or fifth round pick. He's shown good flashes, but linebackers not something that Brandon Staley uses in his defense at all. He really does not scheme around linebackers whatsoever. He's definitely more of a defensive line and DB top heavy group. But overall, on paper, they look so good as long as anyone can stay healthy. Obviously, depth is a question. I think depth can be a question for any team depending on how many injuries you have. I mean, we saw the Ravens last year who had some depth, but when you have 28 people on the IR, like you don't have no team has that much depth. So
Hmm.
depth is definitely something to have a little bto have a question about. And with that, I would say depth and maybe experience. We got
Mm-hmm.
some young guys. Asante Samuel Jr. Had he looked great, showed some amazing flashes last year, but he definitely had a few, maybe unnecessary pass interferences or something along those lines. But I think again, like we mentioned, dudes like Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Derwin James is by far the leader of this defense. Should this defense stay healthy, I think that they're going to be a top 5 unit in the NFL.
See, overall, and that is a really good thing. When you talk about Khalil Mack, that type of talent coming in, and he doesn't have to be the leader. You got Derwin James, you got Bosa, you got these players that have been leaders. I mean, they really, I know in the past, like the Eagles talked about like kind of a super team, but when you look at this talent on the defense, I mean, they're really kind of coming together. There's a lot of pieces, and I have to throw in, you're talking about linebackers and. My guy Nick Neiman out of Iowa, since you're a Nebraska guy, is he going to find a spot on the defense, and even like Kyle Van Noy, some of those linebackers as well?
Yeah, Van Noy was a extremely underrated signing for us. I think he's definitely, they call him the grandpa on the team. I think he's got the most experience outside of Keenan Allen on that squad. But Nick Neiman, yeah, he's a dude that I know we had a few games last year where we had some players miss, either a little bit of banged up, or we were one of those teams that had a big COVID game, where those weeks where all of a sudden you would have 10, 12 guys go on the COVID list. He showed some flashes in those games for sure. But overall, again, Staley's just not one that really utilizes linebackers. I think Neiman should be able to get some snaps this year, but I just don't think that in his defensive scheme, they just don't really do much. They're just not really prioritized much. So yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens. But overall, I mean, I don't really have lofty goals for the linebacking unit.
Yeah, I mean, and when you have that defensive back and the up front, it sounds like kind of the schemes, they don't have to be the focus. But when you look at the focus, of this team and any team in the NFL, it's always the quarterback. I mean, whether they have it or not. And Justin Herbert, and my son actually has a Justin Herbert jersey, and so he's excited. One of his favorite players, but he hasn't really done much. He's done a lot, right? But let's take the other side of the coin. Everyone's always excited about Herbert, but is Justin Herbert playoff charged, as we say? Like, is he that guy that can do it in the playoffs, that can lead a team? Sell me on him in the playoffs.
Oh man, 100%. He is outside. I mean, we got Derwin on that side of the ball, and Justin Herbert, for as quiet and how shy that he might be, he's the undisputed leader of this whole franchise. I mean, he's got to be one of the most likable players in the NFL. And we saw so many instances last year where, we went 9-8 last year, just missed the playoffs at that Monday night game in Vegas. Game I was at in person, absolutely shattered my heart. But I mean, Justin Herbert is just like, he just has the guts. I think he went 6 for 6 on fourth downs, threw the game tying touchdown as time expired from 15 yards out to Mike Williams in a window the size of like a car window. I mean, he literally has the ability to put the team on his back and carry them straight down the field. And now that you give him considerably better defense, I'm just so excited to see what he can do. And his weapons. I mean, we just signed Mike Williams to a big contract. I know some people were calling that an overpay, but when you have a young quarterback, you gotta treat him to his favorite weapons. And Mike Williams definitely emerged last year as one of his favorite weapons, probably the best jump ball receiver in the league, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but then you got dudes like that, and then you got the veteran Keenan Allen, and then second year dude Josh Palmer, out of Tennessee. He's been showing a lot of great flashes in camp. Showed some flashes last year on some contested catches where we're just kind of like, where did he come out of? And I know Colin and I on our pod, we have a running joke that we hope you guys bought your Josh Palmer. We hope you bought into Josh Palmer early because the time is now. So
yeah, I mean, you talk about like fantasy football. I mean, Josh Palmer, I mean, that's kind of a name, that's starting to kind of emerge that I'm hearing a little bit. My question then, before we get to him is Keenan Allen still elite? I mean, he's been amazing. He's had injury histories in the past. Would he be kind of considered elite? And is he in the top 10, top 5 in the NFL as far as wide receivers?
I would put him right about 10. I would love to be a little biased and say that I would put him as high as like 6 or 7. But I mean, with just like the amount of young dudes and insane receivers that are kind of coming into the league and emerging as their own, like it would be hard. It's hard to keep up. But yeah, Keenan Allen 100% is still elite. I mean, if you look at the stats catch wise, I believe he's led the league in catches since like 2016, something along those lines. And his route ability, his route package off the line, his break is just second to none. He's so agile on his feet. He just knows how to get open. They call it third and Keenan for a reason because like
Mm,
dude, when the time is right, when you need third and short, when you got third and five, anywhere inside third and probably like 8, honestly, he's your go-to guy. He can just get open one-on-one and he can find holes in the zone. Keenan Allen's definitely still elite. He's definitely a little bit older, but you mentioned the injuries. Keenan hasn't missed a game since I want to say like the 2018 season. And if he has,
mhm.
it's been one of those things where it's been very little time. Um, so yeah, definitely. I think Keenan again is just one of these leaders. He's the oldest remaining Charger. He's the only player on this team that has played in San Diego. So Keenan 100% is still he's that guy. 100%.
Yeah, it's so weird to think, because I mean, we've heard his name for so long, those of us kind of, in fantasy football and how he's, been that guy. And it's weird to think of him as an old guy, but he really is that veteran. And when you talk about, the wide receiver room, you need that, person you can count on. Sounds like he on third down, he's been really important. And, it seemed like, for quite a few games then last year, Mike Williams was really, I mean, he was putting up a ton of fantasy numbers, a ton of numbers. Why do some Chargers fans say that it was an overpay for him?
I just think because the consistency hasn't been
Mhm.
there. Last year was by far his most consistent year, but outside of that, he always showed flashes, but he's dealt with a few injuries, nothing that's like pretty much smaller stuff or things that have lingered, but I mean, he's missed a few games here or there, but overall, he's always been, his size just kind of speaks for himself. He's
Mhm.
just a big body dude who runs really well. You can get him the ball downfield. He's just been so important in that aspect of the game for us that again, I think once your younger quarterback who's on his rookie deal is building connections with those guys, you got to keep them around for as long as you can.
Absolutely. And you talked about Justin Herbert being, one of the most likable players. Yeah, fantasy wise, it also has to be Austin Ekeler. I mean, overall, I mean, like he engages online with everybody. I mean, and it's kind of cool to see him. But not only that is, he is one of the most electrifying running backs, and he's been that way for a number of years. Obviously, he's had some injuries and everything like that. But talk a little bit about his importance to this offense, and then also some of the other young running backs that could play a role this year as well.
Yeah, Austin Eckler is a dude that I mean, undrafted free agent. He's from Western Colorado, which is probably I don't know 8 hours from where I'm located right now. Division 3 guy. You just gotta love the story that goes along with him. Just really came out of nowhere and just absolutely showed out in training camp quite a few years back and essentially took Melvin Gordon's job from him. Which obviously Melvin Gordon was a first round pick, which that's kind of cool to hear about that. But yeah, Austin Eckler's he's a strong dude. I think everyone's seen the videos of him, doing just squatting an absolute insane amount of weight or some of the workouts that he does. He just seems like he's just built different, basically, would be the way that I would determine Austin Eckler. I know my buddies and I have our fantasy draft coming up tomorrow night, so he's definitely going to be somebody especially if I'm in that top 5, I'm definitely going to be targeting him. But yeah, Austin Eckler. It's going to be nice this year. We just drafted Isaiah Spiller in the 4th round out of Texas A&M. He was one of the top running backs after I think like Brees Hall and there was one other one that went off the board
Mhm.
before him. But um, he's gonna complement Austin Eckler nice. The thing about a run game is we've never had a great number 2 option. Justin Jackson showed his flashes every now and then, but he couldn't stay on the field. Joshua Kelly had a pretty bad year last year. Blair Roundtree was a rookie last year. So I think having somebody that comes in with the talent of a 4th round running back, which 4th round, I know that's decently later in the draft, but for running backs, that's somebody that you can probably account to come in and contribute right away, especially in this offense. So that RB2 spot's still up for grabs between him and Kelly. Kelly's had a great camp. Kelly looked really good in the preseason game last year, but I have total faith in either one of those to be a great number 2 option for Austin Eckler. Because the last thing you want to do is kind of you see the Derrick Henry issue last year with Tennessee. They just pretty much just kind of ran him into the ground, and then the injuries are just bound to happen that way. So it'd be nice to kind of get somebody that complements him.
Absolutely. And you talk about, the running game, you have to start with a lineman, and Rashawn Slater. I mean, that's probably one of the best, draft picks in, team history. I mean, it's hard. He's young, but he's amazing, right?
Yeah, no, Rashawn Slater's insane. They just had a joint practice this week with the Cowboys, and he didn't lose a single rep against Micah Parsons or Demarcus
Mm.
Lawrence. So like I mean, all pro as a rookie kind of speaks for itself. So
Is there, when you look at that line, is there going to be kind of a weakness, or something they need to shore up, or just you know obviously they may run away from, or
yeah, right tackle position still has been up in the air since last year. Big reason why they lost that Week 17 game in Las Vegas was because
Mhm.
Max Crosby just straight up obliterated anybody that they put at right tackle. Obviously, then you got Slater on the other side, and then our new rookie coming in, Zion Johnson. I have a lot of high hopes from him. But right tackle is going to be between Trey Pipkins or Storm Norton um, coming up this year. So Pipkins has looked good so far in camp, has not looked good the past few days of practice going against Parsons and Lawrence, however. So he showed some good reps on film last week, and he's got a little bit more time to develop. He went out of his way. He was working with someone that's worked with like Teron Armstead and
Mm.
Tyron Smith this offseason. So he has that kind of, that self-awareness to know that he needs to improve, and he has done some considerable things in the offseason where I'm just kind of waiting for that to translate against a, week one starting defense in the NFL opposed to some backups in a preseason game. So we'll see. I think that I think that he's taken the steps necessary to go forward and improve drastically. But again, that's definitely the one really area on our line that's still kind of not super high on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the worst things you probably do is take the first week of preseason and say, okay, well, this is what it's going to be. This is a time where they are improving, and that's where you want to see the coaches kind of work with some of these young players, and kind of on that. I mean, when you think of Chargers coaching, I mean, do you trust Brendan Staley, or where are you and the fan base with him as the coach?
Personally, I think that has lost any faith in Brandon Staley after last year. I think that they're kind of stupid just because maybe stupid is not the right word, but I don't get it. Brandon Staley,
Mhm.
people have the conversations about the timeout that happened in that fourth quarter when you need a tie to go to the playoffs or just a win and you're in, something along those lines. But the Raiders the whole time they weren't going for a tie. They weren't.
Mm-mm,
And even if
mm-mm.
so, some of these fourth down decisions that we've seen from Staley, it's so nice. They went for 34 fourth downs last year, which was first in the NFL by 7. I think the next team to do it was like the Ravens or somebody. But it's kind of fun to be a fan of a team that you see so aggressive, and sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. But there were games last year, if he was a conservative coach, we're not winning. There was
Mm.
a number of times where I can think off the top of my head where if we're not getting that fourth down, we're not winning that game. Or if he's deciding to, keep his kicker out, kicking hasn't been the most consistent thing on this team for years. I still we could have the most consistent kicker in the league, and I still will look away every time that we're attempting a field goal. But yeah, I 100% believe in Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley has brought in players that have worked the system, such as Khalil Mack, such as Sebastian Joseph Day, such as Troy Reader, who we just got from the Rams. He's brought in people that's familiar with the system, and I think doing that he's building something, and it's not just trust in his players because they love him to death. He's valuing what our players have on the field, and he knows. He even says, some of his decisions aren't based on math. They're not based on analytics. They're just kind of based on more of a, you know what, screw it. We're gonna do it. This is what I want to do, and this is gonna put us in a better position to win. So yeah, I 100% believe in what Brandon Staley's building. I 100% believe in his system, and I think it's perfect for what he's putting together here in LA.
So that's interesting. You can be frustrated, with all these choices, but I like how you kind of brought it back that you still 100% trust him, because I mean that's what a fan is. I mean you're on board, and especially when you have hopes, when you have the players in place, and so my question then would be, with this team, with everything that's in place, is it playoffs or bust in 2022?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we saw how close we made it last year, and you just can't ignore the offseason acquisitions. You can't ignore the fact that these players are now going to get a whole nother offseason in the same system for the first time in a while. Well, I guess Staley ran his system, but not with this kind of personnel going
Mhm.
into last year. Um, I mean, they went 9-8 last year with, I mean, with some losses that should not have happened. Chargers gonna charge you. I hate that saying, but like I've been a fan since I was 7 years old, and sometimes that's just the case. There's really no excuses for some of the losses that they take, but I just think that this is the most talented group to wear the powder blue probably since like the 2010s. I want to
Mm.
almost say. Like it's. I don't see them winning less than 11 games this year.
Yeah, and that would be huge. I think with that, and so then when you look at it, I mean, yes, the 11 games, and that would put them in the playoffs. I would think, but when you look at this, brutal AFC West, I mean, they're going to all beat up on each other. I mean, who do you see as a favorite? I mean, do you see now the Chargers as a favorite, or who do you think is going to be the favorite in this division to start?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, of course, I'm a little biased, but they got the most complete roster in the division. I don't even think
Hmm.
it's really necessarily close. You can look away from the Chiefs losing Tyreek Hill. That is a massive loss,
Hmm.
whether people want to admit it or not. That is a huge loss for them, and that's a team that they did have a good draft. They got Karloftis
Hmm.
and Sky Moore, who, but you're not going to replace Tyreek Hill that easily. And then the Raiders are, that Devontae Adams acquisition is huge for them, but they didn't do much on that defense. Yes, they signed Chandler
Hmm.
Jones, but the opposite of
Hmm.
Max Crosby now. But other than that, their defensive backs are just not they're not really up to par. They got Denzel Perryman, who leads the league in tackles, but at the end of the day, what kind of a stat even really is tackles at the end of the day? A lot of the time it's just being in the right place at the right time, or obviously there's more that goes into it than that. There's recognizing different schemes or um, just get into the ball carrier. But yeah, Raiders are not anybody that necessarily strikes fear into me. I think that the second best team in this division is probably out in Denver now that they have a quarterback. But
Mm.
still, I think outside of they don't have much depth there in Denver. They're very
Mhm,
top heavy team in my opinion. Javonte
mhm,
Williams does scare the absolute crap out of me. That dude is a scary dude with the ball in his hand. But
mhm.
still, he's going to be splitting with Melvin Gordon. I think they're better off if he was their RB1 and Melvin was RB2 instead of 1A, 1B. And then defensively, Justin Simmons, top 5 safety in the league. And then Pat Surtain's definitely going to take that leap up into a top 10 corner in the league. But Randy Gregory playing in Colorado, it's only a matter of time until he gets suspended for weed. So,
Great
and then
point.
Bradley Chubb hasn't played over 8 games, or Bradley Chubb only played, I want to say he only played like 6 games last year and missed a handful of games the year before. So, again, very top heavy team out there in Denver. But Russell Wilson, I think he's on the decline a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, I think he'll still be the third best quarterback in this division behind Mahomes and Herbert. But they already lost Tim Patrick for the year too, so that's leaving them
Mm.
with Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. I think Jerry Jeudy's going to take a massive step up this year. Cortland Sutton should be good, but he's also coming off that torn ACL, so who knows what that Denver offense is really going to look like. But overall, I just think the Chargers have not really hardly, other than that right tackle spot, there's really not many glaring weaknesses on this team.
Well, you also you beat me to it here. So, how would you rank those AFC quarterbacks again, West quarterbacks again?
All right, there you go. I have to go Carr at 4, and Carr's still probably a borderline top 10 quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but
Mhm,
I
mhm.
just don't think that he's not better than Russell Wilson at this point in his career. He doesn't have any accolades to show for anything.
Well,
He's
It was funny. I put on Twitter, the Tua versus Derek Carr for fantasy, and people were just blowing me up.
I did see that, and I did vote for Derek Carr actually because I do think he's
Yeah.
better than Tua, but I don't think Derek Carr's nobody that strikes fear within me whenever we're going to line up to play him. I think that he's a little above average quarterback, but not more than that. Top 10's lofty. Derek Carr would probably sit around like 12 or 13 in my current ranking. So, but
Well,
Carr 4.
and he's got a lot of weapons there. So that, but Russell Wilson does too. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. I guess again, Derek Carr with Devontae Adams, this could be a whole new Derek Carr that we see this year. So he might be taking that leap this year. But overall talent wise, yeah, Carr at 4. I would put Wilson at 3. If this was a few years back, when it was prime Seahawks, Legion of Boom era, Russell Wilson would probably be in that 2 spot. And then honestly, I think Mahomes and Herbert. Oh man, that's tough. I mean, it breaks my heart, but I would have to put Mahomes at 1 just because he has the accolades to show for it at this point. And then Herbert at 2, obviously. But I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, quarterbacks get the benefit of the doubt when they've been there before, when they've won it before. I mean, as a Bears fan, I hear it from Aaron Rodgers. He gets the benefit of the doubt because he's done it. And He hasn't done it in a while, but he's done it. And when you talk about the AFC West teams, and I've been saying this for a while, and people are trying to keep receipts, and I'm fine with that. But I think the Chiefs finished last in this division this year.
That one surprised me one bit. I think that at least 2 teams are finishing 10 or 7 or below. But when somebody tells me that they think that the Chiefs have the worst roster in the AFC West, that them are the Raiders for sure, in my opinion. And I wouldn't be surprised if you were to put the Chiefs last. 100%. I mean, they lost their biggest weapon. They still got Travis Kelce, obviously, but you have some safeties there's some safety talent out there that can completely erase tight ends from any game plan. So how valuable is it when you're playing a team like that,
Yeah, and so I did one draft already on Monday. Was it Monday? No, Tuesday. Anyway, yeah, Tuesday. And I went, it's a PPR, so I went, heavy on wide receivers, and Juju Smith-Schuster was just sitting there, and I have not been a fan of him, but kind of thinking of who else is going to catch passes there. He kind of intrigues me. So he's on my bench, a little bit further on my bench, but he was there. And so that's going to be interesting to see, what he does with Patrick Mahomes, but in no way can you replicate what Tyreek Hill did. You can't.
No. And trust me, living in Nebraska all my life, I despise the Chiefs more than really anything. I like the Chiefs about as much as I like Iowa. No offense to you, but
no, I get it.
I do not like the Chiefs. I mean, I go to every game in Arrowhead every year, and that's just not a huge Chiefs fan over here. And the news of Tyreek Hill getting out of that division was like Christmas morning for me, because there's no question he's the most explosive player in the NFL with the ball in his hands. Like he can just do things that are ungodly.
Again, and they're definitely going to miss him. You talked about kind of Christmas morning, and we've touched on some of these players already, but sometimes draft can be kind of, Christmas morning, you're opening up packages, you see what are we going to get from some of these players. You said Zion Johnson, you're looking a lot from him, and Isaiah Spiller. What about some of these other players? What roles are they going to play, and how big roles are they going to play this year for the Chargers?
Yeah, so thanks for pulling up this list for me, because I definitely would have forgot. I would have forgot a few others otherwise. But JT Woods is he was our 3rd round guy out of Baylor. He was like a track star at Baylor, ran a 4.3 something 40. Just an absolute burner there at safety. I think he's going to be a great rotational piece to start out. So far this preseason, he's definitely got some room to grow. He had some issues, just like he's flown around and made some hits, but maybe wrapping up hasn't been great. Just in the few little snaps that he played in that preseason game last week. But he's a dude that he just flies to the ball like no other. I know in camp the other day, he made a pick, and then he also sat Dalton Schultz down in that joint practice versus the Cowboys and forced a fumble. So I'm excited for him. I think that he's got the ball skills for sure to be a great player, excuse me. And then Otito Ogbonnia, I don't know a ton about, honestly, out of the rookies. He's the dude I've heard the least about so far in camp. Again, I just think he'll be a rotational piece for that defensive line. I'm expecting that defensive line to be made up of Austin Johnson, Sebastian Joseph Day, Jerry Tillery, and then Ogbania and Christian Covington. That'll just kind of be their 5 rotational pieces that go in and out. So I'm not expecting a huge rookie season from him, and that's also just because I just haven't really heard much about him. We already touched on Zion and Spiller. I have pretty lofty expectations for them. Jamari Salyer might have been the steal of the draft for us, though. We got him in the 6th round. He was actually a tackle at Georgia, and he really protected Stetson Bennett in that title run last year. He only allowed like 3 total pressure, or he didn't allow a single pressure, and he was up against Aiden Hutchinson in that game that led up to the national championship. But he's since moved to guard. He played 12 of 13 games last year for Georgia at tackle, but he's at our guard position now. So I think that makes me feel a little bit better about our right tackle position, even though he's listed at guard. Maybe that would be a transition for him that is maybe smoother should we need it. So I'm really high on him. I know my co-host Collins, me and him have been we think that he's super under the radar. And then Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard have looked really good this camp, especially for a 6th and 7th round pick. Both of them have made some insane plays. I think both of them have a pick off Herbert in camp, which that says something.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. So they've been making some plays. Hopefully that they can make the 53 man, and we'll see them, step up to the occasion when we need them. And then Xander Horvath. This is our 2nd fullback on our team now. We have him and Gabe Neighbors. So I would assume that one of them it's probably a camp battle between those two. Horvath is, he's a tank, but aren't all fullbacks tanks? So, that's not really
right.
That's not really saying much at the fullback position. But I like his name, so I guess I'm rooting for him. And he's a Big Ten boy, so he went.
That's right. He's out of Purdue. He probably gives some tips.
Sure, he scored a few touchdowns against us Huskers, but honestly, who hasn't in the past few years? So.
I'm keeping my mouth quiet I'm keeping shut on that one.
I'm getting looks from my roommate over here. So,
but when you think of Xander, maybe he'll give some tips against Karlaftis then.
Yeah, that's definitely that could be. He could be maybe a little bit of an X factor for us. So, I don't have huge expectations for a ton of our rookies outside of Isaiah Spiller and Zion Johnson, but I definitely think that we have some pieces there that can, transform, that can move into a good starting position someday in the league. So
absolutely. And, this year is going to be important. So are you ready to kind of say, this is what I'm expecting? The Chargers are going to make the playoffs. What are you kind of thinking at this point?
I think full expectations. I personally think that it's going to be either the Chargers or the Bills representing the AFC in the Super Bowl, or maybe I should even just go as far as to say the Bills or an AFC West team representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. And the AFC, Ravens are going to get a bunch of healthy people back. They're going to be a good team. Bengals, obviously, they know how to win some games. And Colts, I think Colts are very much of a dark horse team, but I just think the Chargers and the Bills have by far the 2 most complete rosters in the AFC. I personally have the Chargers winning 12 games this year. I think that they can go 12-5, but I think the floor has got to be, I want to say 10-7, but honestly, it's probably realistically for me 11-6, and their ceiling's probably around 13-4. But I've never been more excited going into a football season. So I have very, very high hopes for this team, and Justin Herbert or Josh Allen MVP. And yeah, I think that they have what it takes. They have what it takes. So as long as Chargers don't charger like Chargers have chargered before, then this is going to be a really good squad, and it's going to be one of the most fun teams to watch out there. So,
well, hey, no one was picking the Bengals, last year, other than what's his name from ESPN, former Lions quarterback,
Orlovsky.
He was the only one that was picking the Bengals. So when you think of teams, this AFC it's really stacked. There is so many good teams. When you think about whatever AFC team kind of gets through to the Super Bowl, you think this year is a year that AFC team wins. The Rams, I mean, they kind of, did what they needed to. I mean, when you think of, LA, I mean, what would happen if it was a Rams Chargers Super Bowl? That would just be nuts, wouldn't it?
Oh man, that would be insane. That would definitely be something that I would be rooting for. Um, Again, I think that we do play each other in the regular season, so maybe that can be a little bit of a preview to see what's happens in the bowl. But yeah, again, I'm just really excited for this year.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be excited. Chargers are one of the most likable teams overall, and quite frankly, when you think of franchises that haven't been there a long time or won it, I remember back in the '90s when they did go and face the Niners. I was rooting for them back then, so definitely want to see the Chargers do well.
Yeah, I wasn't even a thought back when the Chargers represented the AFC in the Super Bowl last. So I think a lot of people are kind of hopping on the bandwagon. I think a lot of people really want to see this team succeed, and they have the pieces, they have the roster, they have the coaching, they have everything that they need in order to succeed. They just gotta put it out there on the field. So I am ecstatic for let's see when it's for September 11th. So
It's coming up. Well, this has been a blast as well. I definitely appreciate you coming on. Where can everyone find you again, Miles?
So yeah, you can find me and my co-host Colin on our podcast, Powder Hour Pod LA. We just talk, we just sit around, drink some beers, talk about Chargers football. You can find us at that on Twitter. My other Twitter account is the Miles Rerucha. It's just my name with the in front of it. But I mean, that's just kind of my personal account. I don't do much on there. So definitely, if you want to hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, find us there, or Spotify or Apple. That's the name of our podcast, Pat Hour Pod LA again. So yeah, if you guys love listening about some Chargers football, we've got it for you. So
Tell you what, like I do an NFC North podcast, and it's been fun, kind of the banter back and forth. But when I think of an exciting this year, especially just being a fly on the wall for an AFC West podcast, I mean that would be interesting, especially as the season progresses. That would be interesting to hear it and listen to.
oh yeah, it's gonna be a bloodbath. Hopefully, we'll be able to collaborate with maybe some Chiefs or Raiders or Broncos fans coming up because it's gonna be hell of a division. It's gonna be a fun year. So
I'll see if I can connect you with a lot. So that would be fun to hear. So,
oh for
but
sure.
once again, this has been NFL Outdated Coverage Series on the LA Chargers. Thanks again, Miles Rerucha.
There you go. You nailed it. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
Awesome. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too, man.